Crazy situation happened on the Capitol today as a Marine Corps veteran and firefighter had his arm broken by a sitting senator during a congressional hearing today. Today, we have Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Aguilar, retired Special Forces operator and whistleblower, who was present and witnessed this event today. And we're going to get into that as well as the War Powers resolution. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here at the Daily Rumble. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and follow wherever you are seeing this program. Tony, thank you again so much for joining us. You've been a regular friend of the show, and we truly appreciate everything that you're doing to fight for justice. Can you tell me a little bit about Brian Mast and what happened today in that Senate hearing?
Brian McGinnis. Brian Mast is the bad guy.
McGinnis, yes. True.
Brian.
Yeah. You know what? We're going to talk about him too here. I had him on my mind. Good correction.
You should, because he is part of the axis of evil, Brian Mast. So Brian McGinnis, former U.S. Marine. Well, I'll say a Marine. Once a Marine, always a Marine. So a U.S. Marine out of service, but also an active duty firefighter in Raleigh, North Carolina, who is also running for the U.S. Senate in North Carolina as a Green Party candidate. Today, he was observing in the observatory gallery the hearing from the Senate Armed Services Committee on the Subcommittee for Resource Management and Planning. So this particular subcommittee takes testimony from the chiefs of the services. So Chief of Staff of the Army, Chief of Naval Operations, Chief of the Air Force, Commandant of the Marine Corps or equivalent. And then obviously we now have Space Force, so Chief of Space Force. And they were there to testify on the readiness of the force, given the considerations of how many munitions we've expended in Ukraine, munitions that we've had to take from Indo-PACOM to now use in CENTCOM for what obviously is going on in Iran. So Congress wanted answers. Is our readiness? And, I'll tell you, those chiefs lied to our Congress. This is a habitual problem with higher ranking general officers. This is why we failed in Iraq. This is why we failed in Afghanistan, because high ranking general officers don't have the spine to say, hey, we can't achieve this mission or execute this mission because we don't have X resource. They get into this mindset of, you always got to tell the boss that you can do it. So it was pretty frustrating and disheartening to listen to that. And then partway through the testimony of, I believe it was the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army was giving his part of his testimony, Brian McGinnis stood up and said, we don't want to fight these wars for Israel. We don't want Americans to die for Israel. And as soon as he stood up, there were two Capitol police officers in the hearing room. They flanked him on both sides, grabbed him, pulled him down. Much like my experience, a little more, they were quite a bit rougher. And then as they were dragging him back, two more officers had him by the coat and the legs. And then in that, you see Senator Tim Sheehy, who I call Tiny Tim or Tim the Tantrum, comes running down he was sitting up on the committee, way up front, behind the gate, up on the committee chair, comes charging down past the last row where I was sitting and jumps into the fray. And because of his interference, not helping, the police did not call for his assistance. There was not a dire emergency. There was not a threat to life. He took it upon himself to intervene. And his intervention, when he came in and grabbed Brian and pulled him up, is what snapped his arm in the door jamb. When they were pulling him out, he was gripping onto the door. It's very difficult to see the way those doors are, but those doors swing open, but they're not like your traditional hinge door that you would see at home. They're kind of on a pivot. So when they open, there's a gap right there. And these are big, heavy wooden doors. These are solid steel core doors. And when Senator Sheehy came in and grabbed him, and it snapped his arm, and everybody heard it. I was there. I witnessed it. I then made it a point to point it out to the committee and to everyone in there that, this U.S. senator, this sitting senator, broke the arm of a U.S. Marine Corps veteran and a firefighter. And what's interesting to me is that, I found it odd that Sheehy decided to get up and come charging down after there were already 4 police officers pulling Brian out. It wasn't like he was the only man in the room, and he did so and putting himself in danger. I mean, the Capitol Police are there to protect them, the senators. There's really no need for it.
Right.
And in doing so, direct negligence resulted in that broken arm. But what was interesting to me, I thought to myself, why? Like, why is he getting involved? And then I thought to myself, a little light bulb came into my head. I wonder who pays for his campaigns. And I looked, and Senator Tim Sheehy, the Republican from Montana, takes 657 from AIPAC. So when Brian McGinnis stood up and was testifying against Israel, that we don't want to go and die for Israel, well, he took it upon himself to act and take actions and to shut him up. I'm convinced that is why. And as he walked back, I called him a coward, and he called me a derogatory name in front of a young infant that was being held in the arms of a family that was there watching. So yeah, he's a real piece of work.
So yeah, I wanted to talk about that. So you're former special forces, and we have these guys. Like I understand. I didn't even know who Tim Sheehy is until this incident, and I looked him up, and it says that he was a former Navy SEAL officer. And then you got guys like Brian Mast, former military. What is the deal with these guys willing to sell out their brother and sisters in arms to a foreign country? Like, how does that even happen? You would think that if you're a veteran, you've seen combat, you understand what the realities of that is, and you've been a part of these pointless wars over the past 20 years, you know that we haven't accomplished anything good over there. The only thing that we've done is cause death and destruction. Why would you want to put more young men and women in harm's way like that?
I think that anyone that serves in Congress that is a veteran, especially, I think every member of Congress should be standing against this war, especially why we're fighting it. But any veteran in Congress should absolutely be the loudest voices. I called this out to Senator Cotton today, right down the hall in the Hart Building 214. The next hearing room over was a closed hearing for intelligence, which Cotton is the chair. Another $3 million in AIPAC money recipient, Tom Cotton. And I yelled out to him. He's got two sons, Gabriel and David. And I said, are Gabriel and David going to go fight? One of them is 7 years away from being 18. If this war goes into, 10, 15 years, are your sons going to go fight? They don't like it when you invoke the names of their children, or you invoke the name or their children in this fight. And that's the sad truth and reality, is that it's okay for everybody else to go fight and die for Israel, but not them, not their kids, not Barron, not Gunner. The Secretary of Defense's oldest son, who's just a couple ways from, who's 16, who'll be 18 soon. Not their children. I was reflecting on this because I was asking myself, do you remember back in 2003 when General Wes Clark, 4-star general, Army, commanded Southern Command, commanded European Command, was the Supreme Allied Commander at headquarters NATO? Pretty bright guy, sharp, West Point graduate. He talked about the 7 wars. He talked about Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Iran. And it was in 2003 that he said that. Well, he retired in 2000. And this quote-unquote memo that he saw about these 7 wars dating back to, post-Gulf War, why didn't he say anything about it then? Why didn't he say anything about it when he was still in uniform as a 4-star general and had the authority and the voice to say something? Why not say anything until 2003 when we're already involved in the third of those 7th wars in Iran, or excuse me, in Iraq? Why didn't he say anything then? It's come to me now that watching these 4-star generals today, 4-star generals, as a 4-star general, when you retire, your retirement is cush. You're making plenty. It's not for the money. So I asked myself, why? And because they sat there and lied to our Congress, talking about our end strength is right where it needs to be. Not true. Our missile capability, right where it needs to be if we had to fight simultaneously, if we had to fight China, Russia, North Korea simultaneously, even when what we have going on in Iran and now in South America with not only Venezuela, but we also went into Ecuador yesterday, and now we have U.S. Army Special Operations conducting operations in Mexico. So These generals lied to Congress. It's disgusting. And it really concerns me. And we have to do more because I'm telling you, the war with Iran, we have already lost this war. The
And I
math.
want to touch on that a little bit too. But first, I want to get back to Brian McGinnis. Quick update
Yes.
on him. I know that he was taken to the hospital because it clearly looks like he has a compound fracture.
Mhm.
It looks like the bone pops out. You can see through his sleeve, which is hard to watch. Do you have any update on his condition? And has he been charged with anything?
I do not know the specifics officially. I do know that he was arrested by Capitol Police and that he was taken to George Washington Hospital for treatment. At this time, he is still there under guarded treatment, meaning he's in the hospital, but he's under arrest. Right now, all attempts to try to communicate with him through Capitol Police have not succeeded. We're trying to, because I'm not a direct family member, so we spoke to his wife to try to call them, since she's his next of kin and direct family member, and they're kind of giving her the runaround as well, kind of telling her, oh yeah, we don't know who that is. And it's like, okay, well, you obviously do. So they're being rather cryptic and kind of being difficult. So we know where he is. We know that he is being detained / arrested. I do not know what charges there will be, if any. And again, if there are charges, to what extent they'll be. I don't know. To say otherwise would be complete speculation, and I don't want to start something that's not true. But I do know, he's going to be out of work for a while because of that. So he's going to need support with medical bills potentially. But we're also, I will fully support it. And right after that, I went outside and I made a formal report to the Capitol Police sergeant and the shift leader, the officer that came, because what Senator Sheehy did was assault. He assaulted Brian, and his direct interaction is what led to that arm being broken. So he should
Yeah, I mean,
have to answer for that.
I'm not a lawyer or anything, but I'm just sitting here looking at it as a passive observer. And I'm like, okay, you have a guy who's not armed. He's not throwing punches. You have 4 Capitol Police on him, escorting him out. And then you have this civilian senator rush over there and play He-Man and cause an injury. To me, it would seem like, if not a criminal charge should be pressed against him, at the very least, Brian McGinnis should have a civil lawsuit against this guy for, false imprisonment, assault, etc. Because again, I didn't see anything in the multiple angles of that video where Brian McGinnis was causing anything of a danger to anyone in that room that would cause civilians to then jump on it. So
Brian
if
was
I
not
were
armed.
McGinnis, yeah, if I were Senator Sheehy, I would be getting a lawyer right now, because I think that guy is definitely going to be in some trouble, if not, criminal, at least civil. So I want to get your opinion real quick. So obviously, there was a lot going on in Congress today. I just seen a report come in. Maybe you can verify because you were there, that the War Powers resolution in Congress was defeated, and therefore Donald Trump now has pretty much unbridled power to basically murder people in the Middle East and wherever he wants. Is that right? Is my read on that correct?
Well, here's your read is correct, and I've learned a lot today about that specific process because I talked to quite a few senators. So today was the vote in the Senate. Tomorrow is the House's version, but because it's already been defeated in the Senate, the House's version is simply more symbolic than it is functional. But the truth is that, as we were walking through the halls of Congress asking senators, how are you going to, now that you know new information, that this wasn't an imminent attack, that we don't really have an off strategy on this, we've got nothing clear from the administration, are you still going to vote yes or no? Like, what's your vote? And we came across, and this is recorded. Medea Benjamin actually has it on her Code Pink website, and I was there. Senator Kevin Cramer, when asked this specific question, he is one of the Republican senators from North Dakota. He said that it is our biblical responsibility to Israel to give President Trump unlimited power. Verbatim. It's posted
That
online
is
in the
wild.
interview. The words came out of his mouth. This is not typed up or translated. These words came out of his mouth, that it is our biblical responsibility to Israel that Donald Trump have unlimited power. And if you go back and look at old Senator Kramer, he takes $1 million from AIPAC this year. So
Imagine
the dots follow the money. But yeah, to that point about the War Powers Resolution. So what I learned today was that a vote of yes would mean that the president should be held to the War Powers Resolution standard at 60 days. He must come back to Congress to report on this quote unquote operation for either further authorization, further funding. What's the strategy? A vote of no, which it was defeated with no, is that he doesn't have to do that. So this is why that's concerning, is that, since the military incursion or the conflict in Korea, the military incursion or the conflict in Vietnam, the conflict that when we went to Grenada and Panama, and then the Gulf War, and then all these things were never formal declarations of war. They were always conflicts and operations. So under President Bush, the global war on terror was never classified as a war. We were under this operational executive order. And that's why if you go back and you look at the operational history of the global war on terror in Iraq and Afghanistan, every 60 days, the operation had a new transition period. Every 60 days for 20 years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you think about that, what's scary about this is that now at the 60-day mark, the president does not have to come back to Congress. So, let's say this was 28 Feb. So 28 Feb, March, April. So end of April, the president does not have to come back to Congress to report to say, hey, here's how it's going. Here's why I said we did this. Here's what's actually happening. Should we continue or not? Are we way off track? Do the American people want this or not? So that's what the War Powers Resolution, if they said yes today, wouldn't automatically stop this conflict. What it would require is that the president and the Secretary of Defense have to come back to Congress at the 60-day mark to report to say, here's what's going on. I think regardless of a War Powers Resolution or not, that's a pretty responsible, prudent step when you're talking about war of this magnitude or any magnitude, when you're sending America's sons and daughters to die. But now, this Congress, the 119th Congress of the United States, has voted clearly that the President of the United States does not have to be held accountable to Congress for war. Why that scares me? It scares me, and here's why. The United States does not have enough interceptor missiles to continue this fight. Every Shahin drone that Iran launches, if it's their class 1 or series 1, maybe about 20 grand. If it's one of their upgraded that can defeat GPS and doesn't get taken down like ones that we're seeing that are hitting now, they're Shahed 3, about 50 grand. In order to take one of those out, whenever you see this Star Wars over the sky with missiles coming in and missiles coming out, that's a $12 million interceptor missile.
Yeah.
It takes 2 to 3 to take out one Shahed drone. Do the math. We don't have enough of them. We can't make any more of them fast enough. Iran has 80,000 of those in stock. They can pump out 300 a day, and that's only their one-way drones. Not to mention, once they deplete our interceptor missile capability, then they start bringing in the big guns. Why waste your good stuff when you know it's going to get interdicted?
Right. And that's the scariest part about this entire thing is, from a lot of experts' calculations, we're only a week or so to where the Gulf states, especially because we've moved so many assets out of the Gulf states to protect Israel, they're now sitting ducks. They're going to get hammered,
Yes.
which means our military bases there with our troops are now sitting ducks. They're going to get hammered. They're already being hammered in places like Bahrain. I think they've had like 6 or 7 direct hits on the Fifth Fleet there. What happens when, Iran really starts to inflict heavy casualties on the United States? My biggest worry is you now have an unhinged, unchecked president with the ability to hit the button for a nuclear weapon. My biggest fear is that they're going to make a calculated decision that they can hit Tehran. The nuclear fallout will be minimum because it's so mountainous that it'll absorb most of the radiation, and they nuke 1 million people.
Yeah, it's that's one of the aspects in all this that really scares me, is because when Tel Aviv and Beersheba and Ashkelon and Ashdod and Haifa continue to get pounded and they run out of interceptors, and then it's open country, and then the real big ones start coming in, and then the American bases and the U.S. assets, because we don't have the ability to intercept or interdict against hypersonics. We don't have enough missiles to take out all of their launchers or missiles that they have in stock. The math doesn't work in our favor. So then what? If I'm going up against an enemy and I expend all of my bullets and they still have bullets, well, all I have left then is to go to grenades, right? So in that scenario, once all the missiles and the conventional is gone and depleted, and you're still at risk because they still possess hypersonics or Fatah 3s and 4s that they haven't even started using yet, then what do? Well, Israel doesn't have many options. And that's what I'm afraid of, because Israel will use a nuclear weapon. We already know that they are willing to. We know that they have it. We know that they have the ability to employ it. And we surely know that they have the policy in their military doctrine to employ it. So that is very concerning, because that will absolutely change the nature of our world. Because if you're looking at that scenario and you're China, Russia, North Korea, Pakistan, gloves are off. The gloves are off. And that's really scary.
I mean, there's a lot of rumor right now, and even big networks are reporting it, that they're trying to get the Iranian Kurds to be some kind of militant boots on the ground force with U.S. Special Forces embedded with them, so that they can call in, air cover, etc., kind of like we did at the beginning of the Afghan war. Here's the problem with that, though. I mean, we fought 20 years in Afghanistan and lost that war because those people just refuse to be conquered, and they have terrain that aids them. Now you think about Iran, it's a bigger country with a much bigger population. They have a much more sophisticated armament, and they have a 1 million-man army sitting there ready to go. Another fear that I have is that the Kurds are now being sucked into this and tricked into becoming the fodder fire, the pawns of this war, and they're going to get absolutely slaughtered, which means, because any support to the Iranian Kurds has to come through the Iraqi Kurds, who right now have somewhat of a peaceful nature between them, Iraq, Turkey, and Iran. Now you're going to start seeing these drones hitting Kurdistan in northern Iraq as well. Erbil is already getting hammered, and then the Kurds in Syria are going to get slaughtered. So there are so many pawns being played in this game, from the Gulf states to the Kurds. And my biggest fear is, and I want your opinion on this because you were in special forces, I know you did mountainous operations, looking at the terrain of Iran, their military capability, what chance does the United States have of actually putting 200,000-300,000 boots on the ground in a country like that?
Every con plan or operational plan or concept plan that was put together for to have at the ready for Iran, every iteration of those war games ended in absolute devastation and failure. Because, one, because of the terrain. Two, because of the nature of the fight. We're fighting a technologically capable enemy. The only way that it was even going to work at all was if we still held Afghanistan and there was an invasion or incursion, distraction from the west, incursion into the east. Because along the western flank of Iran, you have insurmountable mountains and terrain, also to the north. But when you specifically look at the Kurds in this equation, the United States has used and abandoned the Kurds at every date we've been on. We leave them with the bill. In Syria, come on, let's fight ISIS. And then they said, oh, well, we kind of want to keep northeast Syria because, it's part of the Rojava. We can't have it all, but we got some pretty good stuff here in northern Iraq. If we can have northern Syria, we may not get the southern border of Turkey and that portion of Azerbaijan into Iran, but we can deal with this. And we left them high and dry in northeast Syria because Turkey said no, and Turkey's a NATO ally. So it's not as clean cut as Donald Trump thinks it is, that the Kurds are just going to be like, yay, let's go fight in Iran. Because then what? Then what? If this fails, well, then the Kurds have just made themselves an enemy. of that state, they'll be sandwiched, and Turkey, that puts them in a prime position to wipe them out in northeast Syria. So I don't think the Kurds are going to be too excited to join ranks with the United States again when look at right now, the Iran is bombing Erbil. Erbil is the de facto capital of Kurdish Iraq, the Kurdistan region of Iraq. So yeah, I don't think the Kurds are going to bite on that bait. And if they do, they're going to want certain guarantees. And the guarantees that they want will be directly in contention with what Turkey will allow. And Turkey is a NATO ally. So we're in a pretty bad spot in terms of alliance. That's why, before you endeavor on things like this, you do consult Congress, because you want to use diplomacy for coalition building, and you want to have all these things figured out. You hope that when you go into the bar fight, that if you are going to get in a fight, that you got the plan before you got drunk. If you're getting into the fight because you're drunk, well, you're probably gonna get banged up pretty bad. And that's what we did. We got, keg stand Pete Hegseth pulling us in. We have no one advising the president with truth. I think the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, tried to kind of feed some information to open media to be like, hey, I've told the president we shouldn't do this. But yet again, we're not seeing anybody make a stand. I mean, there shouldn't be a 4-star general that isn't willing to be fired by this administration to stand up for what is right for this country, to stand up for the Constitution, to stand up for what they know is wrong. And they're all chicken shit.
I mean, when you look at the Russia and Ukraine war, for example, Ukraine has been able to hold off this superpower, the Russian bear, forever in this war, like several years now. So you imagine the terrain that Iran has, the capability of them to manufacture their own weaponry that can easily be used against the United States. And then you have to think about the China factor. China receives 40% of its oil from Iran. There's no way that China can sit back and just allow the United States and Israel to take over Iran, because now they have a chokehold on their economy. So, of course, China clandestinely, because this is how they operate, they have a neutral stance for everybody, but you know who their real allies are. And if it's in their interest, they're going to help them. So clandestinely, they're going to be sending parts, fuel, weapons, bullets, bombs, everything to Iran, just like we do with Ukraine. But the difference is they can mass produce this stuff 10 times faster than we can, and 10 times cheaper. So we're already $40 trillion in debt. We spent trillions of dollars for 20 years fighting wars in the Middle East. There's no way we can sustain this. Like, our economy could collapse over this, not to mention the fact that the Strait of Hormuz right now is closed. And if that continues, we're going to see $300 a barrel fuel and 70s gas lines lined up for miles just to get gasoline for your car that's going to cost $20 a gallon. So yeah, we're heading into some very dangerous times. I want to thank you, brother, for once again coming on the program, explaining what happened today. Love to have you back. Keep up the good fight. And if everybody doesn't know, if you live in North Carolina, this man right here is running for Congress. So before we drop off, let them know how the people in your district can support you, because we definitely need you in Congress fighting this battle.
Yeah, before I drop off, I'll just say one thing, because obviously we just had the primaries, right? And I want people in North Carolina District 13 to not panic if they went to the primary elections and didn't see my name on the ballot. That's because I don't have to run in the primary. I am the only candidate in the Green Party. Therefore, I am already on the general election ballot. It's like Final Four, semi-bracket. I'm already in the finals. So out of that, though, what I'd like to look at in our district for this election, you had the incumbent Brad Knott as the Republican for the Republican option, which we all were pretty sure of. And then kind of an upset, or kind of a toss-up, when either way, the Democrat was Behringer. But out of that, though, the incumbent in the entire district of North Carolina District 13 has 775,000 population. And Brad Knott won that vote with an 86% landslide with only 43,000 votes. We can win this election in the general Show up to vote. Don't vote by party. Vote by the candidate you want. And if 43,000 votes in the primary gave Brad Knott, the incumbent, the landslide victory of 86% for a relative landslide victory, we can surely, North Carolina District 13, there are 100, 200,000 of us that want to see a change and don't want to put up with more of this. Because I'm telling you, look at the people that I mentioned to y'all today that I've talked to. You have a senator, a Republican senator, saying that our obligation to Israel is biblical righteousness. Is that who you want leading in Congress? The rich who will surely allow us all to die for some prophecy that they themselves probably don't even believe in? It's about the money. So yeah, let's get out there and vote. Show up. Let's make this a win. We can win this.
Absolutely. And if I lived in North Carolina, you would definitely have my vote, brother. I endorse you 100%. We need more fighters like you in the Congress fighting the good fight, because we have way too many sellouts who are willing to just send our sons and daughters to die for a foreign country. So again, thank you so much. And everybody that's watching this at home, on your phone, wherever, make sure you send this video to all of your loved ones and friends, because they need to hear this message very much so. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button, I hope that we've earned your subscription today. It's free. Just smash it, smash the like button, and comment your support down below in the comment section. Thank you again. See you in the next video.
Thank you.
Stay safe, stay free.